5-2 quiz. Number 1, which expression is equivalent to 4h divided by 5? When you look down at the possibilities, you'll notice that they're all written in a different format than horizontally. So that's the first step. The first step is to look at this and ask yourself, how would I write this in vertical form, representing it as a fraction? And so when we do that, you can think of 6 divided by 3. When we write that vertically, we take the first number, which is the dividend, make it our numerator. This second number, which is the divisor, becomes the denominator. So we're just going to do the same thing here. This is going to be our numerator. This is going to be our denominator. So writing that out, we have 4h over 5. Now, sometimes you will see this part written as 1/4, and the h is kind of not right on top of that line. But again, that simply means that we're multiplying the 4 times the h. When there is no sign right next to it, that means you multiply. And remember, h is some number. We don't know what that number is, but it would be the same as writing that over 1. So 4 times h divided by 5 times 1 would be what you would be doing to determine the value when you find h. So when you look at this, you can see that I have a 4 in the numerator here, and I have a 4 in the numerator here. But only on one of these do you have h in the numerator as well. So the correct answer here is D. Number 2, use properties of operations to write an expression equivalent to P divided by 6, or P over 6, plus the quantity in parentheses Q plus 8. So you can use any property that you want. You can use commutative, you can use distributive, you can use associative. The easiest one to me here to use is associative because they have parentheses. So just shifting those parentheses over is, to me, the easiest to use and the most obvious to use. So I'm going to keep my other terms in the order that they are, and I'm just going to simply shift. What number makes the expression equivalent? Number 3. So we have 1/2 times the quantity, -1 4/10, plus 4/10 is equal to something times m plus 2/10. Well, these are in decimal format, and this is in fraction format. So you can work with them that way. You can change everything to fraction or everything to decimal. So I'm going to just simply change this to its decimal equivalent and work that way. That's just a personal preference. So the first thing I'm going to do is simplify this side using the distributive property. I'm going to distribute this 1/2 throughout and see what I get when I'm done with that, so that I can determine what my value for m might be. So I can use my handy dandy calculator, or I can do the math myself. I'm going to choose to use my handy dandy calculator. If you do use a scientific calculator like this and you need a negative sign, it is not the subtraction sign. It's this one right down here. If your calculator is a Texas Instrument 1. If you use the subtraction sign, it's going to want to subtract. So this is a -7/10, this quantity right here. When I distribute, so that m has to come with it. And then when I do 5/10 times 4/10, I know that 5 times 4 is 20, but I know I have two decimal places. I have this decimal place and I have this decimal place. So that means I need to move this decimal over 2 places. It's not 20, it's 200ths. Or if you want to think of it in terms of money, it would be like 20 cents. So this whole side, excuse me, this whole expression simplifies to -7/10 m plus 2/10 or 20/100ths. When I look back up at my original expression, then they want to know what goes right in front of the m. What is the coefficient associated with the m? So now we know that the coefficient associated with the m is -0 and 7/10. Number 4, use the commutative property to write an expression equivalent to -5d plus 1/2. Commutative means order doesn't matter. You can switch them up. And because I only have because I have an expression that only has 2 terms, my only choice is to switch the order of the terms. So I would write 1/2 first. I don't have to put the plus sign in front indicating that it's positive, but I can. And then I need to take this whole part and move it over here. The other thing you can do to help you out here is to change this to a plus and this to its opposite. That also helps you know that this actually is a -5d. So you could write it as 1/2 minus 5d, or the same thing would be 1/2 plus a -5d. And because they're talking about the commutative property, I think it does make the most sense to change this to an addition and this to its opposite. This one makes the most sense to me. This one would work. All right, number 5. For A through D, choose yes or no and tell whether each expression is equivalent to -4/3 p minus 2/5. Well, you know me, I like to change those subtraction or those negatives to things that represent positives. So the first thing I'm going to do is change that. And I could also change this first one so that this looked like this. And then I can come over and look at my choices and compare them. So you can see A has -2/5 minus 4/3 p. Well, if I change these to pluses, you can see I have -2/5 plus -4/3 p. And over here I have -2/5 plus -4/3 p. So this expression is equivalent to this expression because this bottom one is equivalent to that. So this would be yes. Here I have a positive 2/5 minus 4/3 p. So again, we want to change this and see if it matches any of these over here. And it does not. And the reason is because of the 2/5. The 2/5 has to be negative. If you remember from Rob on Math Antics, he talked about how this sign moves with the 2/5. So if you think of this as 2/5, you have to move this sign with it when you reorganize. Just like this has to have this sign moved with it when you reorganize. So this 2/5 has to be negative. So this one does not work. Here we have negative 2/5 minus a negative 2/5 p minus 4/3. So I change these to their opposite. Well, this one isn't right in any way, shape, or form because the p is not associated with the 2/5. So I can go ahead and change that right now. So here we have a negative 4/3 p plus a negative 2/5 p. So that one is exactly the same as this one over here. So the two correct answers here are A and D, and the incorrect answers are B and C.